Hello, my name is Eric Benner. I'm an enterprise architect with Mythics, and in this video we'll be looking at the database level of an agile converged infrastructure system in the Oracle footprint. And here we'll be using Enterprise Manager and focus mainly on the database for this one. So let's log into Enterprise Manager and we'll log in. We'll get our normal detail history here. One thing in this one you might not have seen is we have some security violations in the system. We have some other violations, and we'll take a look at those here in a minute. We're going to look for our targets. Let's go to databases. We'll see we have a couple databases in the system, and we already have some security violations. So let's first go take a look at that. One of the things that the system is able to do is it's not just looking at database performance, and we'll get into a little bit of that. It's also full life cycle. It's full convergence. So it's the database, how it relates to the hardware, the storage, also from a security aspect. How am I securing the database? Where am I at from a security aspect as well? So we have the database, we have a couple of issues. Let's go ahead and bring up just pick one of the databases for the score. This will take us to the home page for the database. See 100% availability here. We've been up 25 days. We have some compliance issues from some profiles that we've attached to it. We also have some recommendations for ADMM and SQL tuning. So the system's leveraging those license packs to identify problems, and here's a recommendation on SQL tuning and some ADDM opportunities. Let's go look at our compliance though, and let's go look at our results. And here we'll pull up the database. We have several profiles attached to here. I have high security and basic security for Oracle database attached. I also have STIGs attached to the database, and I can have different policies attached to the same target. Here I'm using database as an example, and I can drill down. So let's look at like STIG example, and let's go look. We have one critical violation, so let's drill down into it. And here on this particular database has one critical, and it's the supported version, isn't the version required for the STIG. It's pretty straightforward for that one. Let's go look at some of the other violations on the STIGs. And we have 1600 here. This system was not built, by the way, as a secure database. And this goes all the standards, and it'll tell me administrative OS accounts, application object ownership, backup processes, all the things that aren't matching what the STIG should match for the database. And it's not just the STIGs. Oracle has some other ones, certification for the database, and basic security, high security, basic security for the database, which might be applicable environments that aren't in a STIGable environment. So I can look at just basic security, which is just basic practice for that. I have default passwords in the system. I don't have network encryption. It already identifies a lot of issues that are just basic best practice security issues, and all those can be mostly quickly addressed in the system. Just might take a couple minutes to fix these. So you can get an idea of what we can do from a security aspect for the database. We can also look at configuration, and that goes into a lot of it too. One of the things you often see is differences between like a production and a non-production environment. And often we want to go identify what those differences are. So we want to be able to compare those systems. So if I go to my configuration, let's do a compare instead of the latest, which shows the values. And we'll go ahead and pick two targets in the system and compare them here real quickly. Because this will give me the capability of, let's say, comparing production and dev as an example, and seeing what the differences are. Often you can do this manually, but this could take days, hours, days, even longer. I've had times where I've had to do this manually in the past. We spent a week comparing systems, and because there's so many individual metrics to compare, we missed a ton of them. Here it does it automatically, it does it very quickly. So we're comparing the difference, and we've already found between two different databases 11,000 differences. Now we're comparing a lot of different things, so let's clear that up a little bit and not look at all the differences. Let's look at some simple ones like initialization parameters between the database. And I can pull that up, as you can see here, scroll down and find something very quick like secure file. I have one database is permitted and the other one is a preferred setting. Very quick to identify it. Pluggable databases, very quick to identify it's enabled in one and not another. I could look at my SGA target is different between the two as well, and that might point to a problem. I can also look more specific in my SGA parameters themselves, and I could see differences there between buffers and cache. It's a very quick way to identify systems. I can even look at users between the systems. And here I'm able to identify users and see differences between the system. I can see a user's on system A, he's not on system B. I can see different expiration times on users. I get a lot of detail there. What's also important is not only can I compare two systems to each other, I can compare a single system across time. So I don't have to limit myself to just the two targets. I could take a single target and compare this week versus last week. So let's go back into database. Again, we're talking this convergence. The Oracle solution gives you this up the entire stack. So I have this one tool that you can see in other videos. We've looked at the operating system, we've looked at the hardware. Here we're looking at the database. It's that true full stack convergence across the platform. Let's look at some performance stuff. So I can go to Enterprise Manager. We'll go into this one database instance. This will bring up the database homepage. We've seen this before. This will also tell me the OS, either physical or logical, that the system's running on. If I can click on here, it'll take me to the hardware of that node. And it understands that relationship. So if I have a performance problem, I can go into the hardware here and do the normal metrics. I might look at the hardware, look at its CPU, look at its memory. And you can see it's using a lot of memory right now in the system. And I have that agility to do that and to look at it at that detail level. But let's go back to databases. We didn't really need to see the hardware. And let's just go look back at the internals of the database. And let's go look at performance, because that's usually a good place to start. So let's go look at our top activity. So as with all systems Enterprise Manager, eventually it has to log into the target system to look at it. It's able to store the credentials, but enable other users to use them without knowing them, based off their role. Now here I'm a super user, so I have the ability to see all the credentials, but I still can't see the password, but I have access to use the role. So here I'm going to say, let me use the sysdba role with the sys user against this database. The beauty of this is at no point do I know the password to the system. I could be a senior application analyst that is a developer and wants to go look at details to the database. I don't actually have to know the password to have that access, either read access or potentially read write. Here I can see some activity over the last hour, so I'm just going to go pick a spike of activity. And then we will see in the system a whole bunch of activity. We'll see some SQL, some selects. We'll take a select that took a fair amount of time to run. Let's go see what happened there. So we pull up and we actually see the actual SQL for the select. I have the ability to look at it in HTML in a separate window. So it helps me understand what was going on, what was the SQL behind it. I can then look at my execution plan. This will show some of the complexity behind it with the graphical view. And you can see this is already, we can see a pretty complex piece of SQL that it runs behind the scenes. There's a lot of moving components. We can zoom in and zoom out with the graphical view, but I want to go ahead and use the tabular view. It's just my personal preference. And I can see all the components that ran against this one piece of SQL. We can scroll down until we find a piece of SQL with a large operational cost. And here's an example right here. I have this operational cost of 621, expecting 46,000 rows. If I expand what the view is, I can see that we had a full table access. That's a full table scan. A lot of times that could be a sign of a performance problem, and the DBA might want to go look at if that has to happen or if we can maybe put an index on there. Enterprise Manager also has the ability to do that analysis for us. We can see here we had a view that was a pretty large hit to the performance on the CPU. And we can scroll down a little bit and see if we can find out where it hit it. Again, this is a fairly large piece of SQL that hit, but you get an idea at least of the capabilities of the system. Not only do I have that performance, if I go to the database home, it also has its own analyzers, its own tools. So here's an SQL tuning finding. So if I click on that, this is going to tell me some things that it saw that it didn't like, and there might be an ability to do some tuning on it, the ability to optimize the system. So here I saw an unusual application wait event. I can drill into the item. This will give me detail about it. It saw what it showed. Might have recommendations here on what we can do to fix it. Here it wants us to look at the SQL, look for this network break reset to client issue. That could be a couple things that could cause it. But it automatically gives me a place to start looking at where I might have had a performance problem in the system. I have some other capabilities in here, just we don't have enough time to cover them all. Hopefully this gives you an idea of, again, single pane of glass, this agile convergence. It's not locking you in necessarily to a single methodology or a single technology, but you have all the advantages of automation within a converged environment. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to your Mythic sales rep. Thank you.